Before the world had memory, when the sky, sea, and shadow were young, the three brothers drew lots for the realms of the cosmos. One took the sky, one claimed the sea, and the last took what was left. Not by choice, not with joy. Hades was given the underworld, a kingdom of endings, a throne without cheers, a crown no soul envied, while Olympus gleamed in celebration and Poseidon's tides roared with freedom. Hades descended into silence. This is not a tale of villainy, nor is it one of mercy. This is the lore of the god who never sought power, but kept it better than any. This is the tale of the king no one chose. The war had ended, but the scars of the Titanomachy still burned across the fabric of the cosmos. The sky was scorched from thunderbolts hurled by Zeus, the sea churned from Poseidon's rage, and the underworld trembled with the screams of fallen titans. Cronus had been dethroned. The age of the old gods was over. The three brothers stood atop Mount Olympus, the weight of eternity pressing down upon their shoulders. It was not a moment of joy, but of judgment. To divide the world was not to share power. It was to shoulder burdens none of them truly understood. Lots were cast, not as games of chance, but as oaths to fate itself. Zeus drew the sky, a throne in the clouds, surrounded by thunder and lightning, where his word would become law. Poseidon took the sea, wild and vast, boundless in its fury and freedom, and Hades drew the last. He did not speak, did not protest, but in the silence that followed, a truth settled like dust in a tomb. He would rule what all others feared. Zeus drew the heavens, celestial rule, Olympus, the throne in the clouds. Poseidon claimed the oceans, vast, endless, unknowable. And to Hades fell the underworld, a realm unseen, unloved, and unanswered. He did not complain. He did not scowl. He turned and walked away, downward, down past the mortal realm, down past the bones of the Titans, down into the eternal dusk. As Zeus raised temples and Poseidon stirred typhoons, Hades passed forgotten caverns where nameless things slumbered. His was not a path of glory. It was a descent into solemnity. He found the void, and from it he created foundation. He gave it structure, called it Erebus. He carved realms from darkness, summoned rivers from memory and meaning. The river Styx, black as sorrow and binding as fate, flowed like a sacred artery through his domain. Its waters sealed divine oaths, unbreakable even by Zeus. To swear upon Styx was to risk obliteration. The Lethe, river of forgetting, shimmered with quiet cruelty. Souls who drank from it lost all memory of life, shedding identity to be reborn or to drift in peaceful ignorance. Acheron, the river of pain, ferried the newly dead, those who wandered confused and mournful across the border from life to shadow. Cocytus, the river of wailing, cried out with the voices of those who had died, unfulfilled, unanswered, undone. Phlegethon, river of fire, raged like molten wrath through the deepest chambers of the underworld, a place of punishment and purification. Each river shaped the underworld not just by geography, but by philosophy. Together they mapped the soul's journey through memory, pain, silence, and rebirth. And beyond the waters, he summoned Nyx. Not just goddess of night, but night herself, primordial and vast, older than the gods. She guarded the gates of the underworld, her presence casting a veil even fear dared not breach. Her children, Thanatos, Hypnos, Nemesis, moved at Hades' command, balancing death, sleep, and divine retribution. Thanatos, the personification of death, walked silently among souls, his touch cold but merciful, ending life without cruelty. Hypnos, the god of sleep, drifted like mist through the underworld, weaving dreams and stillness, offering rest even to the tormented. And Nemesis, the spirit of retribution, ensured balance, her gaze fixed on those who escape justice in life, her presence a reminder that no sin was forgotten in death. He called forth spirits, silent scribes and judges, to account for every deed committed by mortal hands. The underworld was no paradise. It was a realm of finality, of endless shadows and forgotten names. It was where the souls of mortals journeyed when breath left their bodies, and where even gods tread lightly. There were no laurels for Hades, no golden temples or songs in his honor. While Zeus was hailed as king of gods, and Poseidon worshipped by seafarers and storm callers, Hades slipped into myth as a whisper, a figure glimpsed in torchlight, cloaked in dusk. But the choice, or lack thereof, revealed more than any title could. For Hades did not abandon his realm, he shaped it. He did not flee from the dead, he guided them. He did not rage at the injustice of his lot, he accepted it, and in doing so, he became its master. The cosmos was now divided. Olympus gleamed, the oceans roared, and deep beneath the world, a kingdom of shadows stirred. Its king sat in silence, watching, waiting, unseen, but never absent. Beyond the veil of life, beneath the crust of the world, Hades shaped a kingdom not of chaos, but of order. It was not a land of flames and torment, as feared by the living, but a realm of stillness, of judgment, of final truths. The underworld unfolded in layers, like the rings of an ancient tree, each realm a reflection of how one had lived, what one had valued, and what one had dared. There was Elysium, bathed in golden light, where the souls of heroes, poets, and the virtuous wandered in eternal peace. Its fields were lush, its skies calm, the air itself hummed with the echo of forgotten songs. Here, the worthy were rewarded not with opulence, but with serenity. It was not a paradise of pleasures, but a sanctuary of soul-deep rest. Achilles wandered there, silent now, his rage cooled by eternity. Orpheus played songs too ancient for the world above to remember. Adjacent soft silver meadows lay the asphodel fields, a place neither cursed nor blessed. Souls who had lived lives of quiet neutrality, neither cruel nor kind, ambitious nor lazy, drifted there like autumn leaves. They walked without pain, but also without joy. Memory faded like morning mist. Narcissus stood by a still pool, staring at a reflection he no longer recognized, the memory of his vanity lost, but the habit lingering. And far below, shrouded in smoke and iron, was Tartarus. This was not Hades' creation. It predated even the Olympians. Here, the enemies of the gods, the monsters, the betrayers, and the arrogant were imprisoned. Titans writhed in chains forged by cosmic law. Tantalus reached forever for fruit and water. Sisyphus strained eternally to push his boulder. Punishments were crafted with precision, not for revenge, but for justice made eternal. Even time dared not tread carelessly in Tartarus. At the heart of the underworld's balance stood three judges, Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Iarchus. Each had once lived as mortal kings, wise and incorruptible. In death, they found their true thrones. Minos judged the most complex of souls, those tangled in contradictions, whose lives defied simple verdicts. Rhadamanthus presided over the righteous, ensuring that honor was rewarded with peace. Aeacus judged the hearts of foreigners and travelers, his fairness whispered about even in the mortal world. Together, they stood at the fork of eternity, deciding not with emotion, but with memory. Every soul was a story, every decision a reckoning. When mortals died, Hermes led their spirits to the threshold. There, they waited in silence. They remembered, they wept, they longed. And then the judges spoke. Those who had been cruel were sent to Tartarus. Those who had been kind were sent to Elysium. And those who had simply existed joined the countless others in Asphodel. Every soul passed through this system, not with haste, but with gravity. There were no appeals, no mistakes. The underworld was not merciful, but it was just. And as this grand machinery of death turned, Hades watched. He did not interfere with judgment. He was no tyrant king. He listened to the silence. He walked unseen among the meadows. Sometimes he sat beside a soul who wept, not speaking, just being. Sometimes the wind stirred when no breeze should be, and the souls knew he was near. The underworld was his body, its silence was his voice, and though mortals feared him, the truth was this: Hades did not take life, he received it. He was not death, he was what came after. In his kingdom of silence, nothing was wasted, nothing was forgotten. Everything became part of the whole. Even the underworld, though vast and complete, held space for longing. Hades, for all his stillness and control, watched the world above in silence, watched life unfold with color, with warmth, with passion. And in time, his gaze fell upon a maiden whose presence defied even the sun, Persephone. Daughter of Demeter, goddess of spring and bearer of rebirth. Her essence flowed with vitality, her laughter seeded the breeze. She walked the meadows and fields with bare feet, trailing blossoms in her wake. Where she stepped, flowers bloomed. Where she sang, rivers ran clearer. She was youth, renewal, innocence, and in her, Hades saw something he did not know he lacked. But this is not a tale of monstrous abduction. It is myth shaped by time and misunderstanding. The truth was more nuanced. Yes, he took her, but not with malice, with longing, with loneliness, with a desire to share eternity, not steal it. He rose from the shadows in a chariot of obsidian, drawn by steeds that breathed silence and pierced the mortal realm. The earth split, the world held its breath, and Persephone vanished. Demeter, goddess of harvest and guardian of humanity's survival, wept and raged. Her grief was not mere sorrow, it was devastation. Crops withered, fields decayed, cities emptied, fires died in hearths across the world. The world felt the weight of a mother's anguish, and Zeus, torn between his brother and sister, was forced to intervene. Even as the divine court debated, Hades showed Persephone his world, not as a prison, but as a kingdom. The underworld, so feared by mortals, took on new shape in her presence. He gave her power, a throne beside his, not worship, but partnership. Persephone, once uncertain, began to change. She did not cower, she questioned. She listened to the cries of the dead and judged beside him. She walked the Lethe's shores and dared not flinch. Where Hades was stillness, she was breath. Where he was judgment, She brought empathy. And in time, she became more than spring. She became balance. A choice was offered: to return to the world above if she had not eaten of the food of the dead. But she had tasted a pomegranate, not in ignorance, not by trickery. She chose it, perhaps not fully knowing why, but sensing the truth. Part of her belonged below. The fruit was no curse, it was covenant. One bite for duty, one for transformation. Thus, a balance was struck. For half the year, Persephone would rise to the world above, and the earth would bloom in her joy. And for the other half, she would return to shadow, and the land would mourn. This was the cycle, not just of seasons, but of death and rebirth, of descent and return, of growing and stillness. And Hades? He did not chain her, he welcomed her. Together they ruled, not in dominance, but in duality. He, the silence; she, the voice; he, the stillness; she, the bloom. Persephone was not a captive queen. She was the queen beneath the earth. And in her presence, Hades' realm did not soften, but it breathed, it lived, it remembered love. There is a threshold in the world, unseen but felt in every heartbeat, a gate that stands between breath and silence, between presence and memory. It is the gate to Hades' realm. No marble arches or golden gates mark its place. No heralds stand at its border. It opens without fanfare, and it opens for everyone. But it only opens once. Mortals pass through it as shades, echoes of what they were, stripped of ambition, stripped of voice. Behind them, the world forgets. Ahead of them, judgment awaits. Charon, the ferryman, waits at the river Acheron, silent beneath his hood, hand outstretched. Not for charity, but for coin, obol or drachma, placed beneath the tongue of the dead. A price to cross the threshold. Son of Erebus and Nyx, Charon is as old as the underworld itself. He speaks little, if at all. His task is unending, his eyes clouded not with age, but with eons of silent passage. Myths say his oar is carved from petrified sorrow, and his cloak stitched from the shrouds of forgotten kings. Those without coin? They wander the riverbanks for 100 years, forgotten by both gods and kin, until time itself grants them passage. These souls linger like mist, whispering regrets to one another, watching the ferryman who does not look back. Cerberus waits beyond the gate, not as a hunter, but as a sentinel. Born of Typhon and Echidna, he is terror made flesh. His 3 heads scan every soul for deceit. One head sees the past, one the present, one the possibility of trickery still carried in the soul's breath. His breath can sear illusions, his growl rumble through bone. No living foot may pass, no trick escapes his watch. He is not a beast of violence, he is a boundary. Beyond Cerberus lies not a single road, but an entire world. Asphodel stretches like a dream half remembered, a field of indifferent grey where common souls drift in forgetful quiet. Tartarus churns below with fiery pits, swallowing the wicked in endless punishment. Elysium glows distantly, a paradise for the heroic and the just. And somewhere between them all, the judges wait to weigh each name on the scales of memory. And still, some have tried. Orpheus played his lyre so sweetly that even Hades wept, but still, the gate demanded finality. Eurydice was nearly free, until doubt turned her lover's gaze, and the gate closed once more. Heracles, strong enough to crack mountains, crossed with force, but at a cost. He bore scars from the very air of the underworld. Theseus wandered into its gloom and became lost in its depths. Odysseus slipped through on shadowed words, and though he returned, the underworld never truly left his eyes. Even the gods do not tamper with this gate lightly. The gate is not meant to frighten, it is meant to remind. There is no return, not for kings, not for heroes, not for lovers who dared to promise eternity. And Hades? He does not stand at the gate. He does not lure or chase. He waits where the path ends, not as a collector, but as a constant. He does not rejoice in death, he bears it. When the gate opens, he receives kings and beggars the same, the righteous and the wicked, the known and the forgotten. Because the gate does not ask who you were, only what remains of you. Some souls drink from the lethe and lose themselves in peace. Others grasp tightly to their names, hoping memory alone will preserve them. The ancients buried their dead with rites and song, not only out of reverence, but to soothe the soul for its final journey. Offerings to Hades, coins for Charon, prayers to Hermes to guide their path, all to prepare for the truth. And through it, all things fall silent. All voices echo, all names are weighed. This gate does not close with a slam, it closes with a whisper. Among the gods of Olympus, temples rose like mountains, marble sanctuaries to Zeus, great halls to Athena, sacred groves for Artemis, and oceanside altars for Poseidon. Their names echoed in chants, their faces adorned coin and sculpture. But Hades? Hades had no temple, not because he lacked power, nor because he lacked followers, but because his domain was not one the living wished to invoke. To speak his name was to confront mortality. To honor him was to admit the end. Yet it was not disdain that kept his altars bare. It was fear, the fear of permanence, the dread of the gate that never opens twice. Even the most devout hesitated to utter his name. Instead, they whispered epithets: Pluton, the wealthy one; Eubuleus, the good counselor; or simply, the unseen. These names were not born of reverence but of caution. Still, Hades was ever present. The wealth beneath the earth, gold, silver, gems, was his. In this form, he was known as Pluton, the wealthy one, a reminder that all riches eventually return to the grave. Even in agriculture, seeds had to be buried before they could bloom, and thus Hades played his part in every harvest. Every buried root was a prayer to his realm. He was not absent, he was simply unwelcome, and he never complained. He ruled in silence but with consistency. He honored the laws that even Zeus feared to test. He kept the balance between life and afterlife. And though he walked among shadows, he never tried to escape them. There were places rare and hidden where Hades received worship. The Necromanteon near the Acheron was one, a sanctuary of whispering stone, where mortals sought to speak with the dead. In Elis, at the edge of the world, offerings were left not in grandeur, but in trembling hope. Quiet places, forgotten by time, remembered by fear. In the Eleusinian mysteries, those secret rites that promised rebirth, he was present too, not as tormentor, but as the one who receives. Persephone's descent and return were central to their sacred drama, and through her, Hades stood at the heart of a hopeful cycle. The living feared him, but the dead understood him. To them, Hades was not a villain, he was sanctuary. He did not rage like Ares, he did not deceive like Hermes, he did not fall to hubris like so many others of Olympus. He endured, he bore the unbearable weight of memory, of sorrow, of justice without reward. Even oracles rarely spoke his name aloud. Artists painted him rarely, and when they did, he sat apart, dignified, unmoving, robed in black and crowned with silence. He was the god who never left his post, the keeper of oaths and debts too ancient to speak aloud. Some whispered that he had once been called Eubuleus because he counseled even Zeus. Others believed he was older than any new, less a ruler, more a cosmic necessity. He did not seek worship because he did not need it, for in the end, every soul comes to know him. And perhaps that is why he was the most feared and most misunderstood of all the gods. Not because he punished, but because he waited. Few mortals have seen the land of the dead and returned to speak of it. But one did, guided by desperation, prophecy, and the favor of gods. Odysseus, son of Laertes, king of Ithaca, found himself lost on the endless sea, tossed by storms and cursed by gods, seeking home but grasping only chaos. His voyage, a punishment for blinding Poseidon's son, the Cyclops Polyphemus, was plagued by divine wrath and the weight of war-torn memories. Each island he touched bore another trial, each delay another reminder that the path back to Ithaca would demand a toll in time, trust, and spirit. To find the path forward, he was told to go backward, to descend into the realm of Hades and seek the dead prophet Tiresias. Beyond the pillars of the world, at the shores of Oceanus where no sun dares shine, Odysseus and his crew arrived. There in the twilight lands, he dug a pit in the earth, filled it with offerings, milk, honey, dark wine, barley, and blood. A necromantic rite, older than Olympus, forbidden in the lands of the living, but honored in the lands of the dead. And the dead came. Countless shades swarmed the pit, drawn to the scent of life. Warriors with shattered armor still clinging to ghostly forms. Wanderers with hollow eyes, kings who had once ruled continents and now drifted like ash. Mothers whose children still wept in the land above. Voices long silent, murmuring in the cold. Odysseus saw his mother, pale and sorrowful, who had died from longing. He reached for her, but she passed through him like mist. He saw Achilles, the unmatched warrior, who now regretted trading life for fame. "I would rather be a slave to a poor man on earth," Achilles told him, "than rule over all the dead." He saw Ajax, proud and silent, unwilling to speak to the man he blamed for his disgrace. These were not mere encounters, they were hauntings, mirrors of his own future, etched in the regrets and laments of those who had once lived greatly and fallen silently. As Odysseus looked into the eyes of these shades, he saw the echoes of his own choices, the weight of every ambition, every betrayal, every sacrifice made in the name of homecoming. He wondered if one day he too would drift in that cold twilight, a name remembered more than a soul understood. These visions did not warn him, they invited him to question whether he too would become a cautionary tale told in silence. And then came Tiresias, blind in life, but now more piercing than any eye. He rose from the mass of shades like a flame in the dark. His voice did not echo, but struck. He warned of Poseidon's wrath, of the path between Scylla and Charybdis, of the folly that awaited Odysseus at home. But more than that, he told him the cost of wisdom. That knowledge carved a burden deeper than ignorance. That prophecy is not guidance, but a toll, and that fate, once glimpsed, binds tighter than any chain. It was not merely foresight Odysseus found, it was a reckoning. Still, the underworld offered more. He beheld Tantalus, mouth parched and belly aching, forever reaching for fruit and water that vanished at his touch. He saw Sisyphus, arms trembling, pushing a boulder that mocked him with every fall. These were not stories, they were testaments, lessons carved in eternity. Ixion spun on his burning wheel, for he had lusted after Hera and betrayed sacred trust. The Danaïdes carried water in broken vessels, their task endless, their guilt collective. Punishments matched the soul's betrayal, each echoing the laws of the gods. These souls were bound not just by punishment, but by memory, the memories of what they had been and what they had become. Odysseus walked through their grief and fury, their longing and loss, and in their pain he saw the reflection of mortal fragility. And all the while, the eyes of the underworld watched. Not eyes in the way mortals understand, but consciousnesses lingering like shadow and thought. The walls themselves seemed to observe, carved with faces too worn to remember, yet still aware. Shades without form glided silently along the periphery, their gaze a weight more felt than seen. These were watchers of memory, sentinels of silence. They saw not the flesh, but the soul, its flaws, its fears, its truths. In their gaze, Odysseus felt exposed, not as a hero, but as a man laid bare. Hades did not greet him, did not rise from his throne, but his presence was everywhere, in the hush between voices, in the breath that dared not form, in the weight that pressed upon Odysseus's chest like stone. Even this famed mortal, bold enough to disturb the veil, was not worth disturbing the king's stillness. That silence was the answer. Odysseus left with knowledge, with fear, with humility. He returned to the sea, not just wiser, but changed, because those who look upon the face of death never look at life the same way again. Even after the mortal returned from the shadows, the underworld did not sleep. Above, the seasons turned. The world bloomed and withered and bloomed again, and with each cycle, a memory stirred in the soil, one not of Odysseus, but of Persephone. Each spring, when she rose from the deep, the earth awakened, and each autumn, when she returned to Hades, it grieved. This rhythm, this sacred pendulum of life and death, was not punishment, it was balance. A truth Hades understood better than any. He was not the bringer of death, but the keeper of continuity, and in his realm, nothing was more sacred than a vow. Beneath the surface of myth and mortal fear, Hades' kingdom was a court of contracts, of bindings spoken not in law, but in soul. Here, words did not fade. They were recorded by silent scribes in tomes of shadow, inked with memory, etched into obsidian tablets that could not be broken. To speak a vow in the underworld was to cast it in eternity. The contracts did not merely sit idle, they pulsed faintly in the darkness, like veins beneath stone. When a name was spoken, the vow stirred, awakened, not in vengeance, but in remembrance. Even the gods feared such bindings. Zeus himself, king of Olympus, swore by the river Styx when his own word was at stake. For to break an oath sealed in Hades' domain meant obliteration. Not even immortality could shield one from that price. And when oaths were broken, it was not thunder or flame that arrived. It was the Erinyes. Born of blood and vengeance, the Furies patrolled the edge of conscience. With serpent hair and shrieking breath, they hunted those who defied sacred bonds. They were not tempests of wrath, they were inevitability. Alecto, she who punished moral crimes. Megaera, scourge of jealousy and betrayal. Tisiphone, whose voice sang of murder. Each bore chains woven from the broken promises of gods and men alike. Through caverns slick with memory and halls where time ran backward, they moved. For every vow betrayed, for every trust defiled, they whispered a sentence that no voice could revoke. Tantalus had fed his own child to the gods. Sisyphus had bound Thanatos in chains. Ixion had betrayed the hospitality of Olympus. Each had signed a contract they dared to break, and now they paid, again and again, bound not by chains, but by consequence. Even mortals knew this truth. Obols placed beneath tongues were not mere payment for passage. They were symbols of consent, of acceptance, a pact between the living and the dead. To refuse this right was to wander, lost, unclaimed, unjudged, a soul with no name in the ledger. Once, a young warrior stood at a hearth and vowed to return to his beloved. The war claimed him, but his vow lingered, inked in the halls of Hades, whispered by the Erinyes as they passed. And when she lit a lantern each year in his name, the vow flickered softly beneath the earth, honored still. Some say, if you stand still in the deepest chamber of Erebus, you can hear them. Whispers of broken vows, drifting like wind over stone, the scrape of pen on eternal parchment, the hum of truth crystallizing in the dark. In the world above, rulers swore oaths beneath twilight, invoking Hades to seal them, not for fear of fire, but for the silence that follows a broken truth. Even marriage rites once called upon Persephone, the silent witness to promises that bloom and decay. Persephone's story, too, was sealed by a contract, not of dominance, but of balance. A seed eaten in the depths became a covenant with eternity. For half the year, she walked in sunlight, but her roots remained in shadow. She was a daughter of spring, but also queen of stillness. In her gaze was both bloom and decay. Her laughter stirred blossoms, but her silence could still a heartbeat. To the souls of the dead, she was not mercy, she was memory, given form. And through it all, Hades remained. He listened to the rustle of roots. He watched the souls drift in silent procession. He bore witness to the quiet miracle of endings, birthing beginnings. Whole lineages walked those quiet corridors. Ancestors, nameless now, watched the living from afar, not as ghosts, but as echoes that shaped the blood and dreams of every descendant. And though no temples rose in his name, every grave was an altar, every farewell a prayer. In a hall with no walls, beneath a ceiling of unmoving stars, contracts are etched into lightless stone, witnessed by silence itself. These vows were not spells, they were truths made audible. And in this realm, truth is heavier than iron. Every candle lit in mourning, every name carved in stone, was a faint echo through the veil, reminding the dead they were not forgotten, and reminding the living that all vows end in shadow. So when mortals spoke of hope, of legacy, of return, they did so on the soil his wife had blessed, in a world he had silently preserved. Hades, the forgotten brother, the still king, the god of what comes after. He was never gone, he was always beneath us. And in the end, it is to him, not with fear but with honesty, that all promises return. The underworld did not roar, it did not shout, it judged in silence. Before the throne of Hades, where the walls themselves seemed to listen, stood three shadows robed in solemnity: Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Iacchus. They were not merely echoes of former kings, they were arbiters of the soul. Minos, the final judge, stood in the center. Once the lawgiver of Crete, he held the balance between mercy and consequence. With eyes like cooled bronze and a presence that cut through pretense, he heard the whole of a soul's life, the acts, the intentions, the silences between choices. His word was final. He did not hesitate, and in that certainty there was strange comfort. Rhadamanthus, stern and incorruptible, judged the souls of the East. Known for his fairness even in life, he now served as the voice of law beyond emotion. His memory was flawless. Every oath, every betrayal, every forgotten kindness, he recalled them. His rulings carved truth from fog. Iacchus, humble and grave, judged the souls of the West. He did not speak first, but when he did, his voice carried weight like stone. He was the listener of prayers never answered, of regrets unspoken. He weighed not just the deeds of a life, but the burdens borne. To him came the souls who had wandered far, who died far from home, whose names had faded. Their court was not set above pedestals, but beneath archways woven with shadow and memory. The journey to reach them was not a straight path. It twisted through halls where past laughter echoed like wind and regrets clung to the stone. Shadows of old homes flickered on the walls, memories offered not as torment, but as mirrors. By the time a soul reached the judges, it had already walked through itself. Together, they formed the silent tribunal. There were no pleas, no theatrics, only memory. Before them, the dead stood not in chains, but in naked truth. They faced not punishment, but placement. Those who had lived in balance, neither cruel nor heroic, were guided to the asphodel meadows, a realm of soft grey light where they wandered in quiet recollection. Not joy, not sorrow, just stillness. The virtuous few, whose deeds defied time, were welcomed into the Elysian fields. There, the air shimmered. Music drifted like wind through cypress. It was a reward not of luxury, but of peace earned. And those whose lives had birthed only suffering were cast into Tartarus, a realm beneath even the underworld, where the architecture itself mourned. Here, pain was not inflicted, it was remembered. Regret shaped the walls, and the echo of one's own cruelty was louder than any flame. Yet even Tartarus was not hell. It was not ruled by rage or delight in suffering. It was consequence. It was the echo of choice. Some names were whispered even in the afterlife. Orpheus, who sang before them, Alcestis, who returned from their verdict by sacrifice. Each soul was unique, yet each walked the same path of reckoning. Even Olympus deferred to the tribunal. For while the gods quarreled and mortals waged war, this was the one court that did not bend. Not to prayer, not even to Zeus. It was older than politics, deeper than fear. Judgment was not delivered, it was unveiled. Like pulling back a veil, like turning a mirror to the soul. Here, memory itself was the instrument of justice. And sometimes, when judgment was passed, a petal would fall from nowhere, a sign that Persephone had walked the halls, lending mercy where it was due. For even the tribunal, cloaked in law, bowed its head to the queen beneath. And through it all, Hades did not interfere. He watched, he listened. The judgments were not his to give. Because the underworld was not his throne alone. It was a system, a structure. The soul was weighed not by whim, but by pattern. And in this pattern, justice endured. In a world where gods could lie and mortals could manipulate, here, at last, was a place where nothing could be hidden. And that, more than anything, made it sacred. Here, at the tribunal, the final truth was not vengeance, it was clarity. And in that clarity, the dead did not suffer. They remembered who they had been, and who, now, they must become. The underworld did not end at its gates. Beyond the tribunal, beyond the judgment, it unfolded into vast and solemn geography, a landscape of consequence, memory, and silence. 3 realms stretched beneath the gaze of Hades, each one a reflection of the soul's truth. Those who had lived in balance, neither cruel nor heroic, were guided to the asphodel meadows, a realm of soft grey light where they wandered in quiet recollection. Not joy, not sorrow, just stillness. But this stillness was not peace. Here souls began to forget who they were. They hummed songs whose lyrics had slipped from memory. They murmured names with no faces. The asphodel meadows were a field of drifting identity, where the lives of most mortals slowly faded like ink in rain. The virtuous few, whose deeds defied time, were welcomed into the Elysian fields. There, the air shimmered. Cypress trees lined quiet groves where music drifted without source. Peace was not given, it was earned. Some, reborn again and again, sought entry 3 times. If they succeeded, they passed into the Isles of the Blessed, a hidden paradise where even death felt distant. And those whose lives had birthed only suffering were cast into Tartarus, a realm beneath even the underworld, where the architecture itself mourned. Here, pain was not inflicted, it was remembered. Regret shaped the walls. Echoes of one's own cruelty were louder than flame. The souls here did not scream for forgiveness, they were trapped in the endless echo of their own choices. They walked halls that turned their worst moments into mirrors. Each footstep brought them face to face with what they had become. Some, like Sisyphus or Tantalus, were known by name. Others were simply stories now. Yet even Tartarus was not hell. It was not ruled by rage or delight in suffering. It was consequence. It was the echo of choice. The realm did not punish. It reflected. It watched. Each of these regions bore a kind of awareness, not sentience, but response. The asphodel meadows whispered lullabies of forgetfulness. Elysium breathed with recognition, welcoming those whose virtue lit the path. Tartarus. Tartarus did not roar. It sighed. It judged in silence, and memory was its fire. Before reaching their destination, souls passed through a liminal corridor, the last step between judgment and release. In those twilight halls, memories flickered on the walls like fading flame. A child's laugh, a broken promise, a final breath. The path was not straight. It twisted, coiled, forcing the soul to walk through itself. Some tried to flee, but always found themselves back before the door they had feared. Here, the air was thick with the weight of what had been. And sometimes, when the silence was deepest, a petal would fall from nowhere. Persephone had walked the halls. She did not reverse judgment. She did not rewrite memory. But where she walked, mercy followed. Flowers that never bloomed in life might bud once more in death. In asphodel, she left behind seeds of remembrance. In Elysium, her gaze softened the grief of even the most righteous. In Tartarus, her steps paused the echo for a moment, long enough for a soul to hear something else. A possibility. There were rare souls who did not fit into any realm. A mad prophet whose visions saved thousands but never knew his name. A child who died in fury but had never been taught love. These souls did not vanish. They lingered. The judges waited, sometimes for centuries, for the soul to speak its truth or for a time when it could be truly understood. Even Olympus deferred to this geography, for while gods quarreled and mortals waged war, this map of the soul endured. The underworld was not just where lives ended, it was where truth was sorted, laid bare. And through it all, Hades did not walk the paths. He watched from the high ledge beyond the river. He listened, not to the cries, but to the silences between them. Because the geography of the dead was not a place, it was a reflection. And in it, no lie could survive, not even the ones we told ourselves. The realm of Hades was not easily entered. Its gates did not swing wide for heroes or kings, and yet, some dared. Their names echoed through time not merely for their bravery, but for the way their trespass rippled through the underworld's silence. Orpheus, The poet of grief descended not with sword or shield, but with song. His lyre plucked sorrow from the air itself, and the stones of the underworld wept. He came for love, his Eurydice, torn too soon from life. Even Hades and Persephone, moved by his melody, granted him mercy. But mercy has rules, and when he looked back, just once, too soon, she was gone. The gate closed behind him, heavier than before. The riverbanks where Orpheus played are quieter now, almost reverent. Flowers bloom where none should. The very mist there hums faintly, as if haunted by love unfinished. Heracles did not sing. He wrestled Cerberus into submission, a feat unmatched by mortal or god. Sent by Eurystheus as a labor, he entered as a conqueror, muscles coiled with defiance. The walls groaned with each of his footsteps. Shades recoiled from his heat. Even Cerberus, guardian of boundaries, hesitated before the mortal whose strength was carved from Olympus itself. But even he, the great hero, emerged altered, not by fear, but by the weight of what he saw. Punishment without end, justice unflinching. The lion's skin on his back could not shield him from what lingered in his dreams thereafter. The stones remember Heracles' tread, etched deep with the defiance of life pressing into death. Theseus, bold and foolish, entered the underworld with Pirithous at his side, seeking to steal Persephone herself as a bride. But the underworld does not tolerate arrogance. They sat on the chair of forgetfulness, trapped in stasis until the ages blurred. Heracles freed Theseus later, but Pirithous remained, his hubris a caution to all who think the underworld can be bargained with. The air near the chair of forgetfulness feels colder, as if pride still clings to the space. Shadows seem thicker there. Even the dead walk wider paths around it. Psyche, mortal beloved of Eros, walked into the depths not for conquest but for trust. Sent to retrieve a gift from Persephone, she obeyed each instruction given. She asked no questions, opened no box, took no shortcuts. Her path shimmered softly, as though the realm itself respected her resolve. And for her humility, she returned unharmed. A soul who braved the dead and did not disturb the balance. Psyche's passage blooms faintly, touched by Persephone's favor, like the trailing scent of spring in deep winter. Each passage left an imprint. The underworld is not stone alone. It remembers. It breathes the memory of footsteps and choice. Where Orpheus wept, sorrow lingers. Where Theseus faltered, pride echoes. Hades did not block these visitors, nor did he welcome them. He observed. In his silence, something shifted. An acknowledgement, perhaps, that even his dominion is not immune to mortal longing. But he remained still, constant, watching. Because the underworld is not a place of denial, it is a place of revelation, and those who walk its shadows carry them long after they've left the dark. But not all who dwell in this realm come from the world above. Some were born in darkness, shaped by it. They are the children of shadow, not intruders, but heirs. The underworld did not echo solely with the footsteps of mortals or the decrees of kings. It pulsed with life of its own, ancient, divine, and born from shadow. These were not visitors, they were its blood. The Erinyes, the Furies, were among the oldest. Born from the blood of Uranus when he fell to Gaia's vengeance, they rose not from love or war, but from justice. 3 sisters, Alecto, who punished moral crimes, Megaera, envy and betrayal, Tisiphone, slayer of murderers. Cloaked in black, hair coiled with serpents, their eyes burned with unending purpose. They did not torture, they pursued, and when they found guilt, it fled in vain. Even gods feared their gaze. They patrolled the outskirts of Tartarus, where screams were law and oaths could not hide. From the crossroads and moonlight came Hecate, goddess of liminal spaces. She was not confined to the underworld, but moved through it like smoke through cracks. Sorcerers called her name in hushed voices. She held torches in both hands, one for the way forward, one for what hides behind. In Hades' court, she stood not as servant, but as ally. She walked beside Persephone, whispered to the restless, and offered crossroads to souls who lingered. Where her torches passed, illusion fell away. With Melinoe, she shared dominion over the edges of consciousness, walking the line between dream and death. Macaria, daughter of Hades and Persephone, was mercy in the face of inevitability. She was not death, but the peace that follows it, the good death, the welcome end. Her name was rarely spoken, but her presence felt at bedsides and final breaths. When soldiers fell with honor, when elders closed their eyes with grace, Macaria stood unseen. In myth, she was invoked by those who feared not death itself, but suffering. She was the balm after the wound. Melinoe, shadow-born, danced between terror and truth. Daughter of Hades, perhaps Persephone, perhaps Nyx, her origins veiled in myth. She wandered dreams, draped in twilight, half her face dark, the other pale as moonlight. To those who encountered her, madness sometimes followed, but so did clarity. She did not harm, but revealed. She was a phantom of introspection, forcing souls to confront what they feared in themselves. In Orphic hymns, she was seen as a dual-natured guide, both protector and awakener, unsettling and illuminating. And then, Zagreus, a secret child, a god of many masks. Born of Hades and Persephone in some tellings, of Zeus in others. Torn apart and reborn, a symbol of the cycle. Zagreus blurred the lines between death and renewal, between rage and serenity. Some worshipped him as a version of Dionysus, others as a god who would one day rise to remake the order of the dead. He represented divine resilience, a soul that defied finality. These were not decorations in Hades' court. They were extensions of its will. Each reflected a truth of death, justice, choice, peace, reckoning, return. They were the balance to Olympus's noise. Where Apollo sang and Athena judged, they whispered. Where Poseidon crashed and Ares charged, they watched. Where other gods gathered revelry and devotion, Hades' children walked quietly. Their power was not in spectacle, but in inevitability. They did not demand offerings. They waited, they whispered, they watched. Because the underworld was not still, it grew, it remembered, and in its shadows walked gods who had never known the light, but carried something deeper, understanding. And above them all, silent at the center, sat Hades, the still axis around which these children moved. He did not command their reverence, they gave it freely. For in his silence, they saw strength. In his stillness, they found purpose. And in his presence, each god born of shadow understood. Power need not shout, it need only endure. He did not raise a thunderbolt. He did not ride the waves or chase glory across battlefields. He did not seduce with words or dazzle with golden armor. Hades ruled by silence, not as absence, but as presence too deep for words. He governed what all others fled. He faced what even the boldest gods turned from. Not death itself, but the weight of memory, the permanence of consequence. Where Zeus thundered, Hades listened. Where Poseidon crashed, Hades stood unmoved. Where Hermes laughed, Hades watched. He never claimed Olympus, though he helped build it. He never contested the skies or the seas. He turned away from the throne of the living and took up the burden of what comes after, not in exile, in purpose. There were no parades in his name, no drunken festivals or gilded effigies. His name was whispered, hesitated, avoided. Yet every prayer of parting, every tear shed in mourning, every grave dug in quiet grief, was his sacrament. He was the God of what remains, of bones remembered, names carved in stone, souls laid bare, and he never looked away. He welcomed all, hero and tyrant, queen and child. He judged without spectacle. He forgave without audience. He bore no wrath, but carried all sorrow. Even Persephone, bright queen of the turning seasons, chose to walk beside him, not out of duty, but of understanding. For in his silence, she found steadiness. In his quiet kingdom, a place where nothing needed to be proven. He did not hunger for love, yet he became beloved by those who saw truly. He did not demand loyalty, yet the souls of the dead stood in reverence. Because his strength was not conquest, his power was not dominion, it was constancy. A king whose crown was made not of gold, but of stillness, whose throne was carved from stone and memory. The gods above warred for supremacy. Hades waited. The empires above rose and fell. Hades remembered. The mortals above lived and died. Hades endured. He was never meant to be the most praised, only the most present. Not the god of endings, the god who remains after. You've walked the descent. You stood at the gate. You've listened to the echoes of gods and mortals alike, and in each one, a shadow whispered a name. Hades, not as monster, not as villain, but as truth. You've seen him in silence, in mercy, in justice without praise. You've watched Persephone rise and fall like the tide. You've heard the sobs of shades, the warnings of prophets, the cries of heroes who touched the veil and came back changed. You've met his children, born not of spectacle, but of necessity. You've walked his kingdom, where rivers remember, and where memory holds more power than might. And now, when you speak of Hades, perhaps you won't think only of death, but of what waits behind it, of the patience that outlasts fire, of the balance that tempers chaos, of the throne that does not gleam, but endures. He is not the god of the end. He is the keeper of continuance, the steward of stories, the silence between breaths. And long after Olympus crumbles, long after the last song fades from the lips of men, Hades will still be there, waiting. Thank you for descending with us into the depths of myth, shadow, and soul. If this story moved you, if you found beauty in the quiet strength of Hades, please consider supporting the channel. Like the video, subscribe for more myth, more legend, more meaning beneath the surface. And share your thoughts in the comments. Who should we explore next? This is not just a story, it is a remembrance. And as Hades has taught us, even what is forgotten can endure. Until next time, walk softly, speak truly, and never fear the dark.